Wow. The last few days, they've really been something else, haven't they? Just watching these incredibly rapid, unprecedented events unfold in the Middle East.
Extraordinary is the word. It's definitely a situation that's moving incredibly fast.
And it's so complex,
Mhm.
deeply concerning, frankly. So today we want to do a real deep dive into this escalating conflict between Iran and Israel.
Yeah.
Our mission really is to unpack what's going on, not just, the headlines, but why it's escalated like this. We'll use the latest info we have to try and give you that clear, thorough picture.
Absolutely. And what we're seeing, it's a major step up, a
Mhm.
direct escalation of tensions that have been simmering, really boiling under the surface for a very long time.
Decades. Yeah.
Exactly. And the sources we have help connect those dots, show how this conflict, which was often fought through proxies or in the shadows, has just burst out into the open. Direct military action.
Okay, so let's start there with that history. Because this animosity, it really does go back decades. It might even surprise some people listening that Iran and Israel, well, they used to have a pretty close relationship.
They did, yeah, before the 1979 Islamic Revolution.
Right. But that revolution, that changed everything. Iran's new theocratic government basically pledged to destroy Israel, called it imperialist. And that set the tone, didn't it?
It absolutely did. That shift was foundational. And from Israel's side, that animosity, it's been massively amplified by Iran's nuclear program,
Which they see as.
an existential threat. That's the term they consistently use. Now, Iran, they've always denied seeking nuclear weapons. Supreme Leader Khamenei even issued a fatwa, a religious ruling against them.
But the perception, the threat assessment from Israel's side, that hasn't changed.
Not fundamentally, no. It remains central to their strategic thinking.
And we should mention, while proxy fights have been the norm, we actually saw direct attacks between them back in April and October 2024. Little preludes, maybe?
You could see them that way, yes. And then you add in Israel's actions against proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah, especially after October 7th, 2023. Some reports suggest that weakened Iran's deterrence capability.
That word again, deterrence. So it perhaps paved the way for something more direct.
Plausibly, it changes the calculation.
Yeah.
And Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, he's been very explicit.
Hmm.
He pointed to Iran's nuclear efforts and its ballistic missile program.
Right. I saw that figure. They think Iran wants to produce 300 ballistic missiles a month.
That's the reported concern, yes. And the nuclear program itself, it's a whole saga. You have the 2015 deal, the
A
JCPOA,
nuclear deal, yeah.
which the U.S. pulled out of in 2018 under President Trump.
Even though the IAEA, the international watchdog, said Iran was complying at the time.
Correct. So after the U.S. withdrawal, Iran started ramping up enrichment again. By 2021, they'd reached 60% purity for uranium.
Which isn't weapons grade, but it's
Yeah.
close, right? Technically.
It's a significant step closer. It dramatically shortens the breakout time, the time needed to get to weapons grade,
Yeah.
if they decided to go for it.
Okay, and this is where the intelligence picture gets murky because you mentioned these different assessments. March 2025, U.S. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard says Iran is not building a nuclear weapon.
Right.
But then just, less than 3 months later, June 10th, CENTCOM commander Michael Kurilla warns Iran is weeks away. How do you square that?
It's a great question. It really highlights the challenge of intelligence, doesn't it? Gabbard's assessment might be looking more at sort of current activity towards weaponization.
Yeah.
Is Iran actively building a bomb right now?
Uh.
The answer seemed to be no.
Okay.
Kurilla's warning, though, sounds more focused on capability.
Hmm.
Once you hit 60% enrichment, you are technically just weeks away from having enough fissile material for a weapon. It's about potential versus immediate action.
And that gap, that ambiguity, leaves room for different interpretations.
Exactly. Especially for a country like Israel that feels directly threatened. They might lean towards the more alarming assessment, the weeks away scenario, to justify preemptive action.
And didn't the IAEA find Iran non-compliant just before the strikes?
They did, just the day before, June 12th.
Yeah.
First time in 20 years they'd made such a finding. That likely added weight to Israel's decision.
Okay, so the lead up to June 13th, things moved fast. We had reports, ABC, CBS, saying Israel was considering military action, was fully ready.
Yeah, the signals were there.
And apparently Israel told the U.S. in advance. The Trump administration knew, considered support options.
Right.
And this all happened right after President Trump's own 2-month deadline for Iran to get a nuclear deal expired. The timing seems significant.
Very significant. And you also had that context, which some political analysts pointed out, of intense international pressure on Israel over the situation in Gaza.
So the argument is this attack on Iran provided a kind of distraction.
That's one interpretation, yes. A way to shift the focus, perhaps rally domestic,
Yeah.
and some international support around a different threat.
Okay, so let's get into the operation itself. June 13th, 2025, Israel launches Operation Rising Lion. Netanyahu calls Iran's nuclear program a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival. That name, Rising Lion, any significance there?
It seems to have multiple layers, reportedly referencing the old lion and sun symbol of pre-revolutionary Iran, maybe suggesting a desire for regime change, but also possibly a biblical, quote, reference. It's certainly evocative.
So what did this Rising Lion actually look like on the ground? How big was this preemptive strike?
It was massive, truly massive. Early hours of June 13th, the Israeli Air Force flew 5 distinct waves of airstrikes,
Free.
using over 200 fighter jets, including those F-35I Aetirs, which were reportedly modified for extra range to reach Iran. They dropped over 330 munitions on about 100 targets.
100 targets. And intelligence played a big part.
Absolutely critical. Mossad was reportedly involved in sabotaging Iranian air defenses, their missile infrastructure. There were even reports of a covert drone base set up near Tehran, specifically to take out defenses and help secure air superiority.
Wow. So what were the key targets they hit?
They focused heavily on the nuclear program, but selectively. The Natanz facility, the above-ground parts were destroyed, but the underground sections were apparently intact. Isfahan's uranium conversion facility was damaged, but the Fordo plant, which is buried deep underground, that was untouched.
Interesting. So not a total knockout blow on the nuclear front.
It seems more like significant degradation rather than complete elimination. They also hit missile complexes near Tabriz, a missile base in Kermanshah, various IRGC facilities near Tehran and Paranshar. Public infrastructure got damaged too, inevitably.
But not the active nuclear reactors, like Bushehr.
No. Bushehr wasn't hit, nor was the Tehran research reactor. This suggests, again, a deliberate targeting strategy, aiming to cripple specific military and nuclear capabilities, perhaps without crossing certain red lines that could trigger an even worse response, like hitting a functioning reactor.
Okay. And inside Iran, what was the immediate aftermath like? Reports mentioned explosions across Tehran.
Yes, near military bases, but also spilling into residential areas. Fars News, which is linked to the IRGC, reported homes were hit in a neighborhood known to house high-ranking military officers.
The IRGC headquarters itself was reportedly on fire.
That was reported, yes. Eyewitnesses describe huge flames, repeated blasts, a chaotic scene.
And the human cost? The numbers seem to vary.
They do. Iranian health authorities initially said 224 killed, mostly civilians. But then HRANA, the human rights activists in Iran group, put the figure much higher, 585 killed.
That's a huge discrepancy.
It is. It reflects the difficulty of getting accurate counts in a situation like this.
Yeah.
But HRANA broke it down further. 239 civilians, 126 security personnel with over 1,300 injured. Either way, it's a devastating toll.
And it wasn't just rank and file. Key leaders were killed.
That's right. Confirmed deaths included Major General Mohammad Bagheri, the Armed Forces Chief of Staff, hugely significant. Also Hossein Salami, the head of the IRGC, and Amir Ali Hajizadeh, who commands the IRGC's aerospace force, the missile guy, essentially.
Taking out the top brass.
A major blow to their command structure. And reports also surfaced about nuclear scientists being killed. Figures like Faridun Abbasi, Mohammad Mehdi Taranchi. Some reports mention up to 14 scientists killed.
And civilian casualties were confirmed?
Yes. France 24 had eyewitness accounts confirming women and children were among the victims. It's unavoidable in strikes hitting urban or near-urban areas.
So the international reaction kicks in almost immediately. What was the split?
Pretty sharp divisions. Widespread condemnation from the Islamic world. Jordan, Turkey, Pakistan, Egypt. China and Russia also condemned it.
But not universal condemnation.
No. Iranian opposition groups actually praised the strikes. And the U.S., Germany too, offered praise, framed it in terms of self-defense. Many other Western nations called for de-escalation, but importantly reiterated Israel's right to defend itself. The UN, as you expect, expressed concern, urged restraint.
Okay, so Israel strikes hard, the world reacts, then comes Iran's response. Operation True Promise III, starting the evening of June 13th. What did that look like?
It was Iran's promised harsh response. It began quickly. Initial waves involved over 100 Shahed drones launched from Iran, but also from Iraq.
Proxies involved from the start, then?
Yes. Alongside the drones, an estimated 150 ballistic missiles, targeting military sites in Israel, intelligence sites, but also hitting residential areas.
And the Houthis in Yemen got involved, too.
They did. fired a ballistic missile towards Jerusalem and actually landed in Hebron in the West Bank and injured 5 Palestinians. Shows the regional dimension immediately widening.
And air defenses. Israel's Iron Dome, Arrow, but also allies.
Yes, a major factor. The U.S., Jordan, reportedly other Arab states too, helped intercept a lot of the incoming drones and missiles. It was a coordinated defense effort, which is quite remarkable in itself.
But things didn't stop after that first night. The barrages continued day after day.
They did. It became a sustained campaign. June 14th, another barrage. Dozens of missiles. Some hit homes in Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan, Rishon LeZion.
Casualties there?
Yes. Reports of 2 killed, over 20 injured in Rishon LeZion, including, tragically, a 3-month-old baby who was rescued from rubble. Same day, a separate attack on northern Israel killed 5, including a mother and her 2 daughters in Tamra.
Just devastating. And June 15th.
More escalation.
Yeah.
Simultaneous launches ballistic missiles from Iran and from the Houthis again. Big impacts in Bat Yam, south of Tel Aviv. 9 people killed there, 3 of them children. Significant damage, 61 buildings hit, and 5 of those killed were Ukrainian nationals.
Ukrainian nationals. Caught in the crossfire.
Exactly. Shows the human complexity. Also on the 15th, the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot was reportedly hit.
A scientific institution.
And the 16th.
More barrages. Hits near the U.S. Embassy branch office in Tel Aviv, schools, homes. 8 more civilians killed that day, over 90 injured. Hundreds hospitalized overnight.
And critical infrastructure targeted too.
Yes, the Haifa oil refinery was hit hard on the 16th. Significant damage, forced to shut down. 3 workers there were killed. That's a major economic target.
This is relentless. June 17th.
Continued. Around 20 missiles launched that day. Fewer, maybe, but still impactful. 5 people injured. Hits reported again in Tel Aviv, Bat Yam, Tamra, and Herzliya, damaging an 8-story building, setting an empty bus on fire. The IRGC claimed they hit an Israeli military intelligence center and a Mossad planning center.
Claims that are hard to verify independently, of course.
Of course. And then June 18th, the strikes continued, reportedly hitting factories in Tehran involved in missile production. There was also a report of an Iranian F-35 jet being shot down over Iran, near Javadabad. And the IDF confirmed they shot down a drone over Iran that day. So direct engagement's still happening. So after roughly a week of this intense back and forth, what's the overall toll in Israel, according to the IDF?
The IDF reported 24 people killed in total from the Iranian attacks, mostly civilians, and 804 injured.
And the material damage?
Significant. Residential buildings, cars, infrastructure, especially in the Tel Aviv metro area, Ramat Gan, Bat Yam. The Kiryat, Israel's main military headquarters in Tel Aviv, was also reported hit.
Now, the IDF gave estimates of how much Iran launched versus what got through.
Yes, that was interesting. They estimated Iran launched about 400 missiles and maybe 1,000 drones by June 18th.
Huge numbers.
But they claimed only around 20 missiles actually impacted urban areas, and less than 200 drones even entered Israeli airspace, with none hitting targets.
Which, if accurate, speaks volumes about the air defense effectiveness.
It certainly suggests a very high interception rate, yeah. That multi-layer defense Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow, plus Allied help clearly made a massive difference in preventing even higher casualties and damage.
Okay, let's broaden out. Beyond the direct military exchange, what about the wider impacts? The economy must have taken a huge hit.
Immediately.
Yeah.
And globally. For Israel, the direct cost was estimated at $285 million per day.
It's just staggering.
And huge concerns were raised about their supply of interceptors, especially the expensive Arrow missiles. Some estimates suggested they only had enough for maybe 10, 12 more days of defense at that rate of firing. That's a serious vulnerability.
And the global markets?
Reacted instantly. Oil prices jumped 7 to 11%. Gold went up the usual flight to safety. Bitcoin dropped. Stock markets fell pretty much everywhere. And airline stocks took a nosedive because of all the airspace closures over the region.
And inside Iran, any economic impact felt there?
Reports surfaced of Iranians queuing for fuel, stocking up on food basics. Signs of public anxiety and potential shortages, definitely.
Okay. Shifting to diplomacy. A lot happening there too, right? Behind the scenes, presumably.
Absolutely. You had the UN Security Council meeting right away on June 13th. Very stark statements. Iran calling Israel's attack a declaration of war, Israel framing it as self-preservation.
And the nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran?
Put on ice. Indefinitely suspended, which is a major diplomatic setback.
But there were feelers for a ceasefire.
Apparently, yes. Reports suggested Iran reached out through Qatar and Oman, asking them to mediate with the U.S. for a ceasefire. That indicates, despite the rhetoric, maybe a desire not to let things spiral completely out of control.
And President Trump mentioned efforts too.
We did. So there were many calls and meetings happening, trying to broker a deal. He sounded optimistic, expecting something soon.
Meanwhile, Iran's parliament is talking about leaving the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
They started drafting a proposal, yes. A symbolic but potentially very serious step, even as they officially maintained they weren't pursuing weapons.
What about just the day-to-day disruptions, security measures, societal impact?
Huge disruptions. Widespread internet outages reported in major Iranian cities, which led Elon Musk's SpaceX to reactivate Starlink for Iran, trying to provide an alternative connection.
That's become a pattern in conflicts now.
It has, and Iranian authorities told citizens to delete WhatsApp, claiming Israel was using it for spying, something WhatsApp denied.
Travel chaos too, I imagine.
Big time. Flights suspended in Iran, Israel, airspace closed over Iraq, Jordan. Major headache for international travel. Israel declared a state of maximum alert, banned public gatherings, closed schools, called up reservists, standard wartime footing.
And security concerns spread globally.
Yes, heightened security reported at Jewish sites in the UK, France, the US. The NYPD deployed extra officers to Israeli diplomatic missions. The U.S. Embassy in Iraq warned Americans there about potential attacks, and Israel even launched an airlift to bring back something like 100,000 Israelis stranded abroad.
So, pulling back again, how did the U.S. position evolve through this, and what about the wider international stance?
Well, President Trump, as we said, initially praised Israel's attack, ordered support, but then shifted tone slightly, saying the U.S. was not looking for long-term war, trying to signal support for Israel, but maybe apply some brakes too.
Balancing act.
The difficult one. The U.S. reportedly moved more assets to the region jets, the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz. A show of force, deterrence, maybe reassurance for allies.
Any sense of how this played out domestically in the U.S.?
Interestingly, reports mention division even among Trump's own supporters about how involved the U.S. should be, not universal agreement on intervention.
And we saw protests.
Yes, protests against the war popped up in London, various U.S. cities, reflecting public unease about another major conflict in the Middle East.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize this. For you, our listener, trying to get your head around this crisis, what are the key takeaways? What really stands out?
I think what's truly striking is just how fast this long-running, often indirect hostility exploded into direct open warfare between Iran and Israel. That's the unprecedented part, the sheer intensity and directness of the exchanges. And our deep dive shows, both sides landed heavy blows, significant human cost, serious material damage. It's clearly still a very dynamic, very dangerous situation. That deep-seated animosity combined with the nuclear issue, it finally just boiled over into direct military action. It has absolutely reshaped the regional landscape.
And it's not just regional, is it? That's the other key thing. This has immediate global ripple effects.
Absolutely. You see it in the oil prices, the stock markets, the frantic diplomatic calls.
Yeah.
It underscores how interconnected everything is. What happens between Tehran and Tel Aviv impacts fuel prices in, Tokyo or London. It forces everyone to confront these questions about security, alliances, information warfare in a very real, immediate way.
So we hope this deep dive has given you the context you need to keep following this complex situation with a critical eye.
And maybe leaves you with a final thought to ponder. Given everything we've discussed, the scale of the destruction, the human cost, the diplomatic maneuvering, the nuclear shadow, what fundamental question does this raise for you about, well, the future of resolving conflicts like this in the Middle East? What's the role of nuclear programs, perceived or real, in regional stability? And ultimately, what's the real price of self-preservation on one side and harsh responses on the other?
Lots to think about. Keep digging, keep learning, and keep asking those big questions.